Hi, I'm Leonard Burton, President and CEO of the Center for the Study of Social Policy. At CSSP, we're committed to advancing health justice, economic justice, and family autonomy for children, youth, and families. I'm thrilled to share this conversation with Bill Bettencourt, a Senior Fellow at the Center for the Study of Social Policy. Bill has committed his entire career to focusing on LGBTQ youth and their families, working in community, leading public systems, and co-founding getREAL, a CSSP initiative which focuses on sexual identity and healthy development for Black and Brown LGBTQ plus youth. While this conversation was recorded in Pride Month, as we know and as Bill points out, Pride is important all year round. During this conversation, we talk about how we came to this work, the partnerships that have created more affirming and supportive opportunities and experiences for Black and Brown LGBTQ plus young people in foster care, and the work we must continue to do so they can experience love and healing as members of families and communities without the intervention of public systems. Our conversation was long and wide-ranging. The work that we discuss is central to CSSP's mission, and we invite you to learn more about our commitment to advance racial justice and supporting young people and families at cssp.org. How you doing today?
All right.
Good. So I'm glad to be in conversation with you today. It's more of an honor and a privilege to be sitting in space with you. We've known each other for a long time, and fighting for justice in different spaces and places around the country. And this is just a great opportunity to be with you today. I'm excited for us to talk about racial justice and a vision for the future, specifically related to supporting Black and Brown young people who are LGBTQ plus. And so you've been doing this work for a long time. I've been doing it for
a little less,
but for a minute. We've been, it's been some decades that we've been doing. Been a while that we've been doing this work, and I hope that through our conversation today that we can reflect on the why we do this work, why it's important to you and I individually and collectively, how we do this work, and our approach and principles that ground us in the work. The connection to the history of the work and the future of this work that we're doing together, that you have led, that you're in community with a lot of people around. So as we begin our conversation, I think it's important to start with how we came to this work.
I always had a lot of respect for you, and now in this position, you're the right person at the right time. And I look forward to talking about your vision and how it aligns with our work.
Absolutely, thanks. And there's not a misstep between the vision that we're laying out at the Center for the Study of Social Policy and the work that you're doing on behalf of LGBTQ plus community, particularly these Black and Brown kids who've spent part of their time in foster care. Yeah, I want to go back to 1994 when I was a county supervisor in Tennessee, working in child welfare, juvenile justice, mental health, and education. And I remember doing these assessments, having a team of caseworkers doing assessments for children and families. And it has never escaped me this one particular case where we had submitted a proposal, a packet to a private provider asking to find a placement for this kid. And one of the caseworkers had called the program and said, "Hey, we've had this kid on the waiting list for a long time. We haven't heard. Can you give us an update?" And the guy says on the call, "Well, Robert, there's something about our community, and that we don't about our community, and we don't take too kind to nigger, spics, and queers." Robert's a young white guy. The guy on the other end, the provider, was a white guy. And Robert was incensed by the language. And part of it was because as our daily practice in that office, we had conversations about race, ethnicity, gender, identity, etc. So it wasn't foreign for him to push back when you had someone making these harsh, harmful, draconian homophobic, racist statements, right? And so Robert tells me about it, and long story short, we wrote a letter, got the program closed, had an investigation, got the program closed. That was one of the early, for me, understanding of the intersecting discrimination that people experience.
Right.
Now, the kid was a white kid that we were trying to get placed, but the program, the provider, was clear that it was black folks, Latinx folks, and it was queer folk that they did not want in their community. Yet the state was still providing money to this program. And it's at those times of inconvenience that people like Bill Bettencourt stands up and says, we're not accepting this, and we're not going to spend our money. If I have access to approving contracts, I'm not going to spend that money. So that was, for me, it was understanding the harm that was not just happening to poor people and black people, but what was happening to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer young people in this country.
So I would have to say that my beginning of getting into this work is in the 60s. James Baldwin said it was after years of vomiting up the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I could walk on this earth as if I had a right to be there.
Wow.
And that speaks to what you were just talking about the intersectionality and what have you. But part of the late 60s, 68, 69, there was a lot of movement going on, and I participated in a number of events that really became the foundation for how I view things and what I learned from others being a foot soldier in the movement. What struck me was the conversations that we had, because it wasn't just about the immediacy of what we were doing, but it really was what I call moral imagining what a just world would look like.
And did you say moral imagining?
I call it moral imagining.
I love
then.
it. Yeah.
Which really struck me because we were there to liberate, to have a revolution, and here we are having these discussions, which was a beautiful thing. And a learning thing for me about you can do both.
Yes. Yeah.
And the second thing I learned was that leadership is a choice, not a position. That people stepped up and took leadership roles to make things move. That it wasn't like everything was organized and structured and everybody had a title or a position, et cetera, et cetera. But I learned that that is a value that stuck with me through my work in the community agency I worked in, through the public system, et cetera, and I often spoke to it. Real important values, I think, for our work and for the work you're doing and we will be doing moving forward.
Because you and I have been child welfare leaders in this country. We've led systems.
Right.
I was an assistant commissioner in a system. You were the director of child welfare, the commissioner in San Francisco, county administered system. And we've had all these experiments over the years. We've tried different approaches, so-called best practices, evidence-based practices.
That's right.
We've tried everything. And I talk about it in the context of a failed 60-year human experiment in this country. The modern child welfare system, that is. It's a much older system, but I'm talking about over the last 60 years, we've had all these different experiments. And we've seen the failure of these experiments in these systems. And what I just heard you say was the tinkering around the edges of these systems. It's only going to prop up the system, not the families and the communities that deserve what we talk about in what would be a Swahili term, kujichagulia, self-determination. At CSSP, when we talk about self-determination, we're talking about family autonomy. And families get to choose what their composition is, where they live, who they live with, the resources that they need. And so being able to embrace that is important, and that's what I hear when I hear the work that you're doing with getREAL, and I want to have you to tell me about what does getREAL, the acronym, what does that stand for? I'm really encouraged by the work that you're doing that is saying families get to choose who and what they are. And it's not up to a systems person like me as a child welfare director or juvenile justice director to determine what's best for families. It's also when I think about the economy and resources that families need. When I think about the resources that are at abeyance to the LGBTQ plus community because people's negative feelings and biases toward gay people, they don't get, oftentimes they're excluded from other economic job opportunities. We see that. And being able to go and shop and wherever they want to go and shop or spend money or make investments. All right. But we should be fighting for justice on all those fronts. And then on the health front, my goodness, I live in Alabama, right? And some of these states have these draconian laws that are just piling up and piling up and piling up and excluding LGBTQ people because of these religious views, et cetera.
But our systems should be healing systems where people go for help and get help. Not where they go for help at the last minute because they're afraid something's going to happen to them because they're going to be judged.
Judged and separated, exactly.
Communities do healing work.
Yes.
Families do healing work with all our dysfunction.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And I used to say, don't let one of our children go into that system.
Exactly.
We will figure it out.
Yes.
And it won't look pretty.
Yeah.
It may be a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is our work.
Yes.
And we'll get it done because everybody who can will step up.
Absolutely.
That's an important part. Young people still need spirituality even if they've been rejected.
Absolutely.
Rejected by a church that's not affirming.
Yeah. And as a person, as a clergy person, and as a pastor in my faith, I've seen the church hurt, right? And I've seen the harm that happens. But I also know that there are affirming places, there are affirming congregations, whether it is the church, mosque, synagogue. There are affirming places, and any human being should be able to express and exercise a faith of their choice. And it's important that there are opportunities where people are embraced so that they can work out their faith without fear of harm and reprisal. And so I just want to say
or
that...
being criticized.
Or being criticized for their faith. Or being criticized for their faith, all right? But it's us, it is the community who gets to determine how we are named, not the global minority,
right?
AKA white people.
That's right.
Right? Because black and brown people are the global majority. And it's important that we don't allow ourselves to be named and changed based on what is considered the dominant culture in society.
Yeah. And when we were talking about affirming churches, it's the voices of young people who are starting to shift some of the churches.
Absolutely.
I recently read a story about a minister in the Southern Baptist group in Southern California who shifted his church to become welcoming of everybody and help the congregation agree to do that, not because of young people, but also other people supposedly he connected with and said, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And the long story short is he was driving in the car with his son and a song was on the radio. I can't remember the name of the song. And he said, I like that song. He said, do you know what it's about? And he said, it's about being gay. I'm gay. As it turned out, his journey was really preparing him for being able to embrace his son when he came out.
Yes.
Those stories need to be told more and more. But in the focus groups with young people, I would say, how would you feel about someone asking you about your identity so they could collect data and that sort of thing. And I remember a particular, a trans youth of color who said, I could walk in your office and you could have rainbow flags all over your office. And if all you want to do is check a box, I'm not talking to you.
Wow.
If you're not interested in all who I am, because I'm not just transgender.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not interested in talking to you.
Okay.
And I was like struck by that.
Yes.
And that's that whole intersectionality, the whole child.
Yeah.
And so when we get to the getREAL stuff, the first two words of the acronym are recognize and engaged.
Okay.
And that came out of those focus groups.
Okay.
You can recognize me, but you better engage.
Engage me too. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I appreciate the recognition.
Otherwise,
yeah. Yeah.
This is a waste of my time.
Right. Right.
And
so it's important that organizations like CSSP lend their
Absolutely.
credibility and whatever influence that we would have to particular issues.
That's right.
Okay. And this was one important issue.
It's a very important issue to put together with everything else CSSP was doing.
So we recognize, we engage, as we're talking about real, getting real, get real. We recognize, engage, and then what's the other two?
The other two are affirm and love.
All right.
So all young people need to be affirmed for who they are. You need to know all of the aspects of who they are, because on any given day they could be triggered by any number of things.
Yes.
So how are you going to work with them and understand them and talk with them and support them and build them up
Right.
to healthy development? Because
Yes.
that's what this was all about, promoting healthy sexual and identity development.
Yes.
That was the goal.
Yes.
Without affirming and celebrating them.
Right.
Accepting is like,
Eh.
I accept you, but I have
I
privilege.
still-
I have privilege, and I can go in my groups and not have to deal with talking
Right.
about this stuff.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Affirming, is different.
That acceptance is almost like that same is almost
Yeah.
synonymous to when folk in the racial justice
could
space
go
talk about
all
tolerance.
kinds of ways, yeah.
Right. Like
I'm tolerant.
I'm tolerant. Like I don't want you to tolerate me. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. You've tolerated me.
Right.
Right.
And then love. I mean, every kid in the system needs to have unconditional love and
Yeah.
to learn
Yeah.
to love unconditionally
Yeah.
with their peers and everything else.
It's important to affirm and love and create space in all of our institutions, and to be able to, you did some great work in Allegheny County. You want to talk about some of the work in Allegheny County that you did with getREAL and some other places?
Sure. So we did 6 years in Allegheny County implementing the guidelines for data. But before you can do data, there's a whole lot of work you need to do.
Right, right.
So it took us 6 years. Fortunately, the funder kept funding us. And we gave them a little money so they could hire a project manager for getREAL.
You gave
the county
some money, okay.
a little bit
Yeah.
for a position. And then Kristen Weber and I co-led the work in Allegheny and a lot of the getREAL work. But we had to start out with the attorneys,
Okay.
children's attorneys, parents' attorneys,
Foster
the
Parent
county
Association.
attorneys.
Yeah.
Well, just the attorneys alone because of the issues around confidentiality
Got it.
and data.
Okay.
And a lot of pushback initially. Shannon Wilbur,
Yes.
who was the head of Legal Services for Children, who's a colleague. We did a lot of work in California. That was the foundation for getting to getREAL,
Yes.
which we could talk about later and some more. But anyway, Shannon's an attorney, and we did the trainings together. We would leave those trainings with our stomach in knots because of the anger, the craziness. One time she was going to start, before she could speak, this woman said, "I want you to know right now, I don't like this."
Wow.
She's like, "Well, thank you for that."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just listen and see how it goes. So it was a lot of pushback. They were very anxious about it. But I remember this one thing when we had a work group with some gay young people there.
Okay.
Because they had a good program of youth advisors in Allegheny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were talking about confidentiality, and this young person said, "You will talk about my mother's drug habit, me being sexually assaulted, but you all are worried about talking about my identity?
Wow.
That's your problem."
That's your problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. We use our risk aversion to not do justice.
You know, we went back to Allegheny at the end and did
Yes.
an IA, and there's a lot of resources on your website at
For the
CSSP
institutional
for folks
analysis
to
and
use to
getREAL.
talk about that experience, et cetera. But
Sure.
some of the things that happened that, you know, are positive, we can't change these systems, but we can make them a little bit better.
Right.
And when we went in, the group homes were not supportive and affirming
Absolutely.
in Allegheny County.
Absolutely.
The courts did not know how to talk to young people. They would not use their chosen name or pronouns.
Yes.
They would, one judge was described as telling a young lesbian youth to pull their jeans up. What does she think she is, a man? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
In court?
Yeah. In court. Yes.
And by the time we had finished the 6 years, we were hearing from the people that worked for the children's attorneys, who were the ones that really had the best information,
Sure.
was that there were now group homes where young people were going that were affirming, that the courts had learned how to talk to young people, how to use chosen names and pronouns, and how to understand the requests for medical interventions for young people.
Yes.
Those were big things to get a system to move to. Still a policing and surveillance system.
It
Gonna
is.
do what it's going to do.
Yes.
And we don't know where they're at with their data. It would be wonderful to check back in with them
Sure.
as we think about this next iteration of work and see where they're at
Yeah.
and talk with them, because they still have relationships with people there. So we can do that.
Sure.
But some of the other stuff we did that I always felt was really impactful was how people find family,
Yes.
how trans people of color were doing sex work. Marsha B. Johnson, that's how Marsha did some work. She and Sylvia Rivera, it was through their sex work they made money to help other
Fund
trans
it.
folks.
Yes.
This is our history. We have to remember.
Absolutely.
Because it's in the present,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And here we are in the present.
Yes.
And the ballroom scene, and young people needing to have the houses and the family structure that goes with the houses.
Yeah.
But these are the alternatives that young people do without systems,
Yes. Yeah.
and that families can do without systems, communities can do without systems.
Yeah.
This is the example of the future
For
work
community. Right.
and healing
Yes.
and love
Yes.
and community and spirituality within all that.
Yes.
We have lots of resources, one of which is called, what they've really developed, which I think is the groundbreaking one that we need to build up, is called the Youth Acceptance Project. It's a clinical model to work with families
Yes.
who are having conflicts around SOGI issues with the young people
Yes.
to keep them out of the system, really.
That's the work, Bill.
Now, they end up doing some with some cases in the system, but most
Sure.
of the ones they've done
Yeah.
are with families to keep out of the system.
Yeah.
Working, most of the families they work with are families of color.
Yeah.
They have excellent outcomes.
The Acceptance Project.
Youth Acceptance
Youth-
Project.
youth
It's a
ex-
clinical model that is really aligned with the family autonomy.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. That's what
work.
I'm hearing.
They're a really interesting model. I don't give it justice with my simplistic
no, but this
view, but they have excellent training and coaching that they do for the people that do the work.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because
Yeah.
it takes those type of approaches and interventions and processes. If we're talking about creating a beloved community, a beloved society, there are aspects in every sector of society that could use some affirming type of work, and that's how we create a beloved community where pain isn't expected, where harm isn't expected, where families get what they need, where the resources are available to them.
And they get it when they need it.
And they get it when they need it, and
At
not
the
on
beginning,
anybody
before
else's
it gets
terms.
too far down the
Yes,
road.
yes,
You know?
yeah. So this project, that approach, that clinical approach, is actually a good buffer from, as I'm hearing it, from a parent rejecting, parents summarily rejecting a child and getting into a space where they're learning and growing together and healing together, so that they don't never have to cross the threshold of the child welfare or juvenile justice system or any other of these intervening systems, public systems, or harm the child where the child is so harmed and in fear that they commit suicide.
Or they just run.
Or they just
end
run
up on the streets
and end up on the street and being trafficked and homeless.
Trafficked, sex work, et cetera, et cetera.
All of that. Yeah.
Right. That would be the idea. Right.
So let's talk a little bit about why getREAL is important now.
Particularly the branding is a call to action for me.
Yeah.
It's like getREAL.
Yes. Like getREAL.
GetREAL. And
Yeah.
do we need to get real now?
Yeah, we need to get real. Quit playing.
Right.
Get real.
So it's a way to move the work we do.
Okay.
All kinds of different work.
Sure.
Promoting YAP, for example. So it gets
Promoting
the Youth Acceptance Project,
Acceptance
Family
Project,
Intervention
yes.
model, so that more people do it and pay
Yes.
for it.
Yes.
You know, they're paying for all this other stuff.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, the right is doing what they always do, which who can we scapegoat?
Yes.
That there will be people who don't get things enough that they buy into. And gender affirming care is about finding out what is really happening with a young person, with a family, so they understand it, because sometimes young people may be thinking they
Yeah.
have a different gender because a mother died.
Right.
And they're grieving.
Yes.
And they're doing that.
Yes.
As opposed to someone who really does, who's persistently saying, this is who I am.
Wow.
Who's
Right.
wanting to jump out the window of a car at 4 years old.
Yeah.
Those kind of things
Right.
that happen, that these parents, I went to Gender Spectrum, my eyes were open when I talked to the parents about how they ended up there.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they didn't start
The
out
reality,
there.
what their child's
But when
reality.
their child was in that much pain,
Yes.
that's when they needed the help. But
Yes.
gender affirming care is really about helping people through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
When they get to a certain age and they talk about puberty blockers or hormone therapy,
Yeah.
that's done very carefully
Sure.
and thoughtfully
Yeah.
to help them through those stages of development
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
without them going into doing harm
Yeah.
to themselves.
Yeah. And yeah, being so
But they know they can spin this.
exactly. Exactly.
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the same thing they're doing with women and reproductive justice. You
Yes.
know, contraception, really?
Real.
Talking about health,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're talking about health justice.
Yes.
It's all about health justice.
It is.
And it's impacting
Yes.
those who are economically most impacted
Yes.
because of
Yeah.
their circumstances.
Yeah, because-
So it's
because
about
if you're
economic
well-resourced,
justice,
right.
because you may be a family that can move, but if you're not, what do you do?
Right. Then you have to
Right.
suffer.
So in all those places where all this shit is happening, there are people still working with kids, and there are still kids going through all their stuff. I think it would be really important for us to find out what's happening for them, how they're managing,
Yes.
what kind of support they need, what
Yeah.
kind of support we can in solidarity with others,
Yeah.
whether it's the Soji Center or other organizations
Right.
that we all can bring
Right.
to support,
Right.
while we continue to put out things that push against all that's being said and done.
And so when people ask, how does getREAL fit in to the North Star of CSSP, as we're laying out our North Star, which is health justice, economic justice, and family autonomy, with racial justice as a common through line, to really challenge the social structures in this society so that we are creating a beloved community. All right. And how does what we've talked about getREAL? Talk a little bit more about how the vision, the new work of getREAL continues to fit in.
It's what we've been doing.
Is what you've been doing.
It is the evolution of all the work around the LGBT, young people, families, community. You
Yeah.
know, there was a time where we thought these families were horrible, that rejected their kids, and that the best place for kids was in group homes with other gay kids, till the gay kids said, I don't want to be with all gay kids.
Right. Right.
And they were finding and creating their own families.
Yes.
They wanted family, not that.
Right.
Then we moved a little bit further along evolution into more gay families, more people having kids, more of that happening, because that has all been part of the evolution of everything, moving to marriage as a institution for gay people that they want to push back on.
Yes. Yeah.
And the same thing has happened, and it's always been about, for our work with getREAL around racial justice.
Yes.
And all the young people we're talking about, the families we're talking about, the agencies that are doing work in the community.
Yeah.
It's all about health justice is what we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And economic justice is what's part of the challenge and the barrier to.
Right.
There are grassroots agencies in communities operating on a shoestring.
On a shoestring, yes.
Doing this work.
Yes.
The healing work, the lifting up work, the affirming work.
Yeah. And not getting access to the capital.
And known in community and part of community that people don't know about often outside, and they think communities, always has been. It's like the way in which they have pathologized parenting of different cultures. It's the white model, right? Come to the parenting class that doesn't do crap for me.
Right.
Would have said shit, but crap.
Right.
It
is.
Jump through the hoops.
It is.
And they're the white dominant culture hoops. They're not doing anything for you.
No. Causing more harm.
Causing more harm.
Causing more harm. So we're in Pride Month right now.
We're in Pride Month.
We're in Pride Month. And I was walking last night and looking at the beautiful Chicago skyline, and many of the buildings
have the rainbow colors.
Have the rainbow colors on it, and
then
and you saw families walking and couples walking, the street, and it just felt like an affirming community. At least you can see
you can feel that.
You could feel that.
It's not perfect like
it's not perfect,
place, but it's certainly better than places where they're banning everything.
Right. Exactly. So I was joyful to see that. Why is Pride Month so important?
Pride is important. It was black and proud. Pride is important for all of us because, as I said at the quote of James Baldwin in the beginning, until I had years of vomiting up the filth I was taught about myself and half believed before I could walk on this earth as if I had a right to do so. That is it. Baldwin was eloquent and hits it right on the head. Because that's what proud is about. And pride is important for people to come together, and when they're there in a group with all kinds of people celebrating them, it's affirming. It's affirming. And there's a lot of people who are not getting that, but when they go to Pride, they have that experience. So Leonard, I want to thank you for this conversation and for taking the time to do this, for your support of getREAL, recognizing the need and how it aligns, because I know you know that.
Thank you so much, Bill.
It's beautiful.
This has been a wonderful day with you, and I so much appreciate it.
Thank you.